reflecting windows, loop-line railways, and the port of Dublin. Beyond Butt Bridge is another world.
Hello, Charlie. How's it going?
Yeah, how's it going?
How are you keeping?
There you are. Grand day this morning.
Yeah. How's
Very
yourself?
well. See you.
Do you know, whenever you pass by this old ballast office, you should really raise your hat. And if you're not wearing a hat, you should give it a bit of an old salute. Because you know what? It was the ballast board that gave Dubliners one of the finest ports in Europe.
At one time, shallow waters, drifting sands, and the dumping of ballast made the port of Dublin the terror of every sailor, merchant and seaman. The ships couldn't get up the river, so they had to dock out in Dalkey and Ringsend. And they say that you could run around the ships at low tide in Ringsend, and you wouldn't even wet your feet. Work goes on daily with the heavy cranes and the offloading of goods and merchandise at the port of Dublin. But at one time, this stuff all had to be brought along the Dalkey Road into the city because the drifting sand made the waters very shallow and the ships couldn't get up the river. This was first noticed in 1652 by a man called Gerard Boat. There were others, Andrew Yarranton. A man called Henry Howard wanted to solve the problem. And of course, Alderman Hawkins got permission to build a wall at College Green and shove back the river. And there's a nice boat of grain. And there's the bell. I wonder, is that Beardo hour? And there's the dredging going on. At one time, there were 18 ships dredging the port of Dublin. But despite all the dredging that went on, they still couldn't stop the drifting sand. There's no joy in the ferry ride today. Empty. 30 years ago, that would have been chock-a-block with dockers and factory girls going back and forward. Of course, it was only tuppence to travel then. Can you imagine they'd leave that bit of grain there for the pigeons? So the pigeons like the top bit off the lorry. Despite all the dredging, they still couldn't solve the problem. The merchants kicked up a row, said they'd leave Dublin, take their business elsewhere unless the corporation set up a separate port authority. After Hawkins claimed the Lear Street and City Quay, the corporation started reclaiming what they called Newfoundland, the North Lots. The corporation also laid quiches, baskets of stones, to make a canal, throwing deep in the river, but the merchants still protested. And in 1707, the corporation established a separate port authority and tried their hand at building walls and dredging the river to make it deeper. But the merchants still protested. And in 1786, the Parliament in College Green called the matter to a head by passing an act and establishing the Ballast Board, the board to preserve and develop the Port of Dublin. And that was the start of the revolution in making the Port of Dublin the great port that it is today. I'm walking down Misery Hill, Dublin, and this is the spot where the poor outcast came to die. The people suffering with leprosy, who were trying to make their way on pilgrimage to the shrine at St. James at Compostela. But the disease had spread too far, and they weren't let on board the vessels, and they weren't let back into the city of Dublin. So they were brought down here. A man was employed to walk in front of them with a long white pole, another man to ring a bell, and a third man to cry, "Unclean, unclean." This was also a gallows area, a hanging place. There was one man in particular who was hanged in Misery Hill for stealing a calico shirt. This is where they all spent their last moments. The poor suffering lepers, and the poor people that climbed the gallows. They died here on Misery Hill. Well, at one time in Dublin you had three gas works: the Alliance Gas Company, the Dublin Gas Company and the Hibernian Gas Company. And in 1866 they all got together, and as the Dubliner says, they had rare gas. They formed the Dublin Alliance and Consumers Gas Company. We've come to the point of the Great South Wall, and what an engineering feat that was, building the Great South Wall. Aye, and the North Wall, and the Great North Wall, which we know today as the Bull Wall, and of course the engineering feat of the lot, Alexander the Basin. When the great men in the Dublin Port and Docks Board, aye, and the old ballast board, and the great vision they had in laying out the Port of Dublin for us Dubliners. The bells of City Quay. It's hard to believe that City Quay was underwater up to 1666. But the community grown in City Quay with merchants and sailors and people coming and going, it was decided that it would have to have its own special church. Now there was a Father McCann up in St. Michan's Church, and he was left a bit of money. So he put up 5,000 of it to lay the foundation stone of City Quay Church, which was laid in 1861. And 2 years later, in 1863, the church was opened. The Church of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, City Quay, was a chapel of ease to Westland Row, but in 1908 it became a separate parish. There's the Holy Communion money, so they're getting 2 bob. He's telling her mammy now, "Mammy, that woman gave me 2 shillings. Do you know what? They should put 3 big statues on this bridge. One to George Halpin, one to Francis Giles, and one to Dr. Bindon Stoney, because they're the 3 men, the Port and Dock's own engineers, who built the Bull Wall, the Great North Wall that solved the problem of Dublin, and Bindon Stoney designed the heavy machinery for laying the foundation of Alexandra Basin. Talbot Memorial Bridge, 1978. A fine view of Gandon's Custom House. Foundation stone was laid in 1781 and it took 10 years to build. The chief stone cutter was a man called Donnelly, and he had a lad called Eddie Smith who designed all that sculpture work. That's typical of the civil service. One door and you have to go to another door. You know, it's a great thing to bring your children down to the custom house of a Sunday with their sketchbooks and let them sketch out all these heads and masks, and then let them find out what they represent, because these masks and heads represent the 13 principal rivers of Ireland and the Atlantic Ocean. I'll give you one clue. The only lady head is Anna Livia. What a sight this was, Spencer Dock. The docks there raised up into the air, and the coal ships coming all down along the river. And in summertime, that dock would be flooded to millions of little silver fishes all around the top of that river there. And the kingfisher swooping down, and without even hitting the water, up again, with 2 or 3 of them little fishes in its mouth. This was where they tied up the boats coming in. Sometimes they held them in the dock up along the river there, through the locks. Thousands of men, dockers, carters, the reed men for the boat, the stevedore, the button men and the casual men, the number 7 shovels. And the men filled the tubs of coal, and the crane then coming up along the gantry and lifting the coal out of the ship right onto the coal bank. Here's the SS Jade and the Whitehaven, the SS Air, all the ships carrying up to 3 and often 4 and 500 tons of coal. Moss banknotes. Every piece of coal uniform in size. What a sight that was to see that lying down around the wall of the docks there. Donnelly's coal yard, Spencer Dock. Oh, it's like a ghost town today. But what it was in those early post-war years and right into the 50s, a mountain, a hive of activity. Breasters, carters, fillers, tappers out, singers on, men, button men and casuals waiting to rule the reed. All the wagons railed down along here. This here was the weighbridge. That was my old office there, and behind the toilets and the filler's hut. Mountains upon mountains of black diamonds of coal, right down to the end. What a sight that was. 8 o'clock in the morning, 100 horse cars, a couple of old steam cars and 1 or 2 motors. Come in there and tear, pull off Neddy, 1900 weight, right John, Casey, Derrington, Finnegan, Gilchrist and Hooley. Then the men came back in here across into the office. There was a passageway here. Glass partition. Give us that 2 ton for the port and docks, a handy hole of a drop in Westmoreland Street.
What is next on it? Anything there for Ayrton Sanders? Well, hail, rain or snow, they never let the old hospitals down or the emergency deliveries. Even if it was teeming rain or you were up to their ankles in snow, they went down with their shovels and pushed aside the water and got in and loaded the wringing wet coal bags to bring out the coal to the hospitals. Always used to say, sure, God love the poor patients. We can't let them down, Mr. T. Come on, give us that 6 ton for Vince's. And what about Mercer's and the Mead? Did they get theirs? There was great spirit here among the Dublin dockers. They were a family. They were a great community to work with. But what life, and what sadness, and what laughter. Here at the Weighbridge, in Donnelly's Spencer Dock.
The British and Irish Steam Packet Company. Well, they had their first offices here in 1836. And this was their transit shed. To me, it looks like a building that was built by famine relief work. The chain hoist was worked actually by a water pump. There's the ball and chain. Of course, the hook was for sticking into the sacks and was hooked off and taken up into this transit shed to be weighed customs clearance and rail. John Bean's Mariner Man, made of iron and steel bolts and nuts, a wonderful symbol of the iron men that sail the wooden ships. The Point Depot. This was at one time the Coast Guard station. All the customs. The engineers of the port and dock lived at the Point building. Of course, the railway meant a very big development to the port, taking the stuff right off the ship onto the rail.